My name is Hannah Carter. I'm 34 years old, and a few months ago, I sold the last property my late father left me. The deal was worth $20 million. The day the sale was finalized, my best friend told me something that made absolutely no sense. He looked at me very seriously and said, "When your family asks about the money, tell them the bank took everything. Tell them you went bankrupt and got nothing." I stared at him, completely confused. Why would I lie about something like that? But he didn't explain. He just looked at me and said one thing. "Hannah, just trust me." I didn't understand his reason, but I trusted him. And what happened after that didn't just surprise me, it completely exposed the people I once trusted the most. Before I tell you what actually happened, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Now let me tell you my story. The day I sold my late father's property was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. The deal had taken months to finish. Lawyers, paperwork, meetings with investors. It felt like it would never end. But that morning, I finally sat across the table from the buyers and signed the last document, and just like that, it was done. The old property my father left me had officially been sold for $20 million. When the final paper was signed, the man across the table smiled and shook my hand. "Congratulations, Miss Carter," he said. "Your father built something very valuable." I nodded and tried to smile back, but in truth, my chest felt heavy. That property wasn't just land. It was part of my father's life. He had bought it more than 30 years ago, and I still remembered visiting it with him when I was a little girl. He used to walk around the land proudly, telling me about his plans for the future. When he passed away 2 years ago, the property became my responsibility. Keeping it had been difficult. Taxes were high, maintenance was expensive, and honestly, it held too many memories. So after thinking about it for a long time, I decided to sell it. Now it was finally over. I walked out of the office building that afternoon with a strange mix of emotions, part relief, part sadness, and part excitement, because I knew my family would be happy for me. My family had always been incredibly supportive. My mother, Linda, had called me almost every day during the sale process, often saying, "Hannah, your father would be so proud of you." My stepfather, Robert, had also been encouraging. One evening at dinner he told me, "You're handling everything better than most people would. Your father trusted you with that property for a reason." Even my younger sister Megan, who usually liked to tease me, had been surprisingly kind. One night she hugged me and joked that I was basically the responsible one in the family now. It wasn't just them either. My aunts, uncles, and cousins had all been checking in on me. Our family dinners had become almost weekly events since my father passed away. Sometimes I felt overwhelmed by all the attention, but in a good way. It made me feel like I wasn't alone. After leaving the building that afternoon, I called the one person who had helped me through everything, my best friend, Daniel. Daniel and I had known each other for almost 15 years. We met in college and somehow stayed close even as life got busy. He was the kind of friend who always showed up when you needed him. When my father got sick, Daniel was the one who drove me to the hospital late at night. When the funeral happened, he stood quietly beside me the whole time. And when I started the process of selling the property, he helped me review documents and make decisions. So naturally, he was the first person I called. I told him the deal was finished. There was a short pause before he asked, "$20 million?" I laughed softly and confirmed it. He responded quietly that my dad would be proud. We talked for a few minutes about the meeting and the paperwork, but then his voice changed slightly, and he said there was something he needed to ask me. I asked what it was. He told me that when my family asked about the sale, he wanted me to tell them the bank had taken the property and that after paying debts and taxes, I had gotten nothing. I frowned immediately and asked what he meant. He calmly repeated that I should tell them the bank forced the sale and that I received nothing from it. For a moment, I honestly thought he was joking. I laughed nervously and told him it wasn't funny, but he said he was serious. I stopped walking and asked him why I would ever say something like that. There was silence on the phone before he spoke again and simply said, "Hannah, just trust me." I told him that wasn't an explanation. He admitted it wasn't, but still asked me to do it. I felt completely confused. My family had supported me through everything, so why would I lie to them? I told him it didn't make sense. Daniel agreed that it didn't seem logical, but he asked me to trust him as a friend. I stood there on the sidewalk staring at the busy street. Daniel had never asked something like this from me before. Not once. And he had always been someone I trusted. Still, the request felt strange. Very strange. Eventually, I sighed and agreed, but I told him he owed me an explanation. He promised I would get one, but not yet. That evening, I drove to my mother's house for our usual family dinner. Everyone was already there when I arrived. My mom rushed to hug me the moment I walked in and said warmly that they had all been waiting to hear the news. My stepfather smiled from the dining table while Megan leaned forward with excitement and immediately asked if the deal had gone through. Every pair of eyes in the room turned toward me, and in that moment Daniel's words echoed in my head. Tell them the bank took everything. I took a slow breath and quietly told them that the deal hadn't exactly gone the way we had hoped. The room suddenly became very quiet. My mom's smile slowly faded. "What do you mean?" she asked. I looked down at the table, pretending to be uncomfortable. "The bank had some claims on the property," I said carefully. "Taxes, old fees, a few legal things we didn't expect." My stepfather Robert leaned forward. "So, what does that mean exactly?" "It means the bank forced the sale," I said softly. "And after everything was paid, there wasn't much left." "How much is not much?" my sister Megan asked. I hesitated for a second before answering. "Honestly, almost nothing." For a moment, nobody spoke. The happy mood that had filled the room earlier completely disappeared. My mom slowly sat back in her chair. "Oh," she said quietly. Robert cleared his throat. "That's unfortunate." Before that moment, whenever the property came up in conversation, everyone seemed excited. They talked about what a big opportunity it was and how proud my father would be. But now the energy in the room felt different. Very different. Megan picked up her phone and started scrolling, no longer interested in the conversation. My aunt, who had been smiling earlier, suddenly said she needed to leave early. Within 15 minutes, the dinner that was supposed to celebrate my big day had basically ended. As I drove home that night, I kept thinking about how strange the evening had been. Maybe everyone was just disappointed for me, I told myself. That had to be it. The next few days were quiet. Normally, my mom called me almost every morning, but after that dinner, she didn't call at all. I tried not to think too much about it. People get busy, I reminded myself. Still, the silence felt strange. A week later, I visited my mom's house again. Things felt different. When I walked into the kitchen, Megan barely looked up from her laptop. "Hey," she said quickly. My mom gave me a short hug, but it didn't feel like the warm hug she used to give. Robert nodded at me from the living room, but didn't say much. I tried to ignore the tension. "So, how's everyone doing?" I asked with a smile. "Fine," Megan said without looking at me. Dinner that night felt awkward. The conversation moved around the table, but no one really asked me anything anymore. A month earlier, everyone had been asking about the property, the deal, the lawyers, the process. Now, it was like none of it mattered. At one point, Robert said something that surprised me. "You know," he said while cutting his steak, "your father worked very hard for that property." "I know," I replied quietly. "It's a shame things didn't work out," he continued. "Sometimes people make poor financial decisions." I looked up at him. Was he blaming me? I didn't exactly have control over the bank situation, I said calmly. He shrugged. "Still unfortunate." My mom didn't say anything. She just kept eating. That silence hurt more than his comment. Over the next few weeks, the change became impossible to ignore. My family stopped inviting me to certain gatherings. When I called my mom, she often sounded distracted. Megan barely responded to my messages anymore. Even small things started happening. One afternoon, my aunt mentioned that I should probably start being more responsible with money. Another cousin joked that maybe I should get a better job. The strange thing was, none of them had ever talked to me like that before. Before the property sale, they always treated me like the responsible one in the family, the one who handled things. Now, suddenly I felt like the disappointment. One evening, I ran into Megan at a small cafe near her office. She looked surprised to see me. "Oh, hey," she said. "Hey," I replied. "Want to sit for a minute?" She shrugged and sat down across from me. We talked for a few minutes about work, but then she suddenly said something that caught me off guard. You know, Mom and Robert are pretty worried about you. Worried? I asked. Yeah, she said. I mean, losing that property was a huge mistake. I stared at her. It wasn't exactly my choice, I reminded her. Well, Megan said with a small shrug. You're the one who handled everything. Her tone wasn't angry. It was worse. It sounded disappointed. That night when I got home, I sat on my couch thinking about everything that had changed. Just a few weeks ago, my family had been so loving, so supportive. Now it felt like they looked at me differently, like I had somehow failed them. The thought kept circling in my head. Maybe Daniel was right about something. But every time I considered that possibility, I pushed it away. No, that couldn't be true. My family loved me. They always had. And they always would. At least, that's what I believed. Until the night, everything finally exploded. It happened on a rainy Thursday evening. My mom had asked me to come over for dinner and said Robert wanted to talk about something important. The message sounded serious, but I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was just another family discussion. When I arrived, the house felt different the moment I stepped inside. The air felt tense. My mom was sitting in the living room with Robert and Megan, and none of them were smiling. Sit down, Hannah, Robert said. His voice was cold. I slowly sat on the chair across from them and asked, What's going on? Robert looked at my mom, then back at me. We've been thinking about the situation, he said. What situation? I asked. The property, he replied. And your financial problems. I frowned. I already told you what happened. Yes, he said. And that's exactly the problem. Megan crossed her arms and said, You lost the most valuable thing Dad ever owned. I didn't lose it, I replied. The bank forced the sale. Robert shook his head. Either way, the result is the same, he said. I felt my chest tighten. What are you trying to say? He leaned back in his chair and said, This house can't become a place where people depend on us financially. I stared at him. I'm not depending on you. Robert laughed quietly. Not yet, he said. Then he said something I will never forget. There's no place for beggars here. The words felt like a slap. My mom still hadn't said anything. She just sat there quietly. Mom, I said softly. She avoided my eyes. Hannah, maybe it's better if you stay somewhere else for a while. For a moment I thought I had misunderstood. You're asking me to leave? Megan rolled her eyes. You're 34, Hannah. You should be able to figure things out. The room felt like it was spinning. Just a few weeks ago, these same people had hugged me, praised me, and told me how proud they were. Now they were throwing me out. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just stood up slowly. Okay, I said quietly, and I walked out of the house. The rain was still falling when I reached my car. I sat there for several minutes before starting the engine. There was only one place I could go, Daniel's apartment. When he opened the door and saw my face, he immediately stepped aside and said, Hannah, come in. The moment I stepped inside, the emotions I had been holding back finally broke, and I started crying. I don't understand, I said through tears. Why did they suddenly change like this? Daniel stayed silent for a moment, then sighed. Because nothing changed, he said quietly. You just finally saw the truth. I wiped my eyes and asked, What truth? Daniel sat down across from me and said, I heard something a few weeks before your property sale. What do you mean? I asked. I overheard your stepfather and Megan talking, he said. My stomach tightened. What were they saying? They were planning what to do with the money from your father's property. They believed you would sell it and then let the family help manage the money. They were already discussing how it could be shared. The room went silent. They what? I asked quietly. Daniel nodded slowly. That's why I asked you to tell them you got nothing. Why didn't you tell me the truth back then? I asked. His answer came immediately. Because you wouldn't have believed me. He looked directly at me and added, You loved your family too much. The words hurt, but deep down I knew he was right. They showed their real faces the moment they believed the money was gone, he continued. I sat there quietly for a long time. Slowly, the sadness inside me turned into something else, clarity. A few weeks later, my family held a memorial event for my father. Relatives, neighbors, and old friends gathered at a small community hall, and my mom gave a short speech about honoring his memory. Near the end of the event, I stood up and said, "I'd like to say something too." Everyone turned toward me. My stepfather looked irritated and asked, "What is it, Hannah?" I took a deep breath and said calmly, "There's something I need to correct. The bank never took the property. I sold it for $20 million. Gasps spread through the crowd. My mother's face turned pale, and Megan's eyes widened. And the most interesting part, I added, was seeing how my family treated me after they believed I had nothing. No one said a word. I looked around the room one last time, then I walked out. That night, I blocked every one of their numbers. Some people lose money and find out who their real friends are. I lost my family and finally learned the truth about them.